The calm before the storm. The human fleet was ready, poised at the edge of a vast, uncharted region of space. It had been months since they received the order to prepare for this mission, and the crew was anxious to finally face what lay ahead. Ships of all sizes, from mighty dreadnoughts to smaller, more agile frigates, filled the endless blackness of space. The sound of the fleet's engines hummed low, a steady reminder of the power that lay within each ship. But despite the visible readiness of the fleet, a sense of unease lingered in the air. Commander Alia Thorne stood on the bridge of the flagship, her eyes scanning the star map before her. A seasoned officer, she had led the fleet through numerous battles. Yet this mission felt different. The last few weeks had been filled with reports of an enemy force growing in strength. The Empire, an alien race of immense power, had been threatening human colonies for years. But this time, the reports were different. This time, the Empire wasn't just attacking small colonies. They were gathering a force unlike anything humanity had ever faced before. "Commander, we're approaching the outer perimeter of the battle zone," Lieutenant Juno said from the communication station. "All ships are in formation, ready for deployment." Alia nodded, her expression tight. She had been preparing for this moment for weeks, but now that it was here, doubt began to creep into her mind. She turned to her tactical officer, Lieutenant Alden. "Do we have any updates from our scouts?" Alia asked. Alden's face remained calm, but there was a slight frown on his lips. "Scouts have encountered unusual readings, Commander. We're picking up some sort of interference. Jammer signals, possibly. It's hard to get a clear picture of the enemy fleet's location." The tension in the room grew thicker. The Empire was known for its advanced technology, and if they had deployed jamming devices, it would make it nearly impossible to track their movements. Alia had studied their tactics. They were experts in ambushes, using technology and deception to throw their enemies off balance. She didn't like it. The uncertainty made the battle feel more dangerous than ever. "Any visual contact?" Alia asked, her voice steady, but betraying the urgency she felt inside. "Not yet," Alden replied. "But we're getting close. The signal interference is fading as we approach the heart of the battle zone. We should have a visual soon." Alia turned her attention back to the window, her gaze fixed on the endless stars stretching out before them. She couldn't help but wonder if they were walking into a trap. The humans had always prided themselves on their resilience, their ability to adapt, and their bravery. But facing an empire with far superior firepower, would it be enough? At that moment, a voice echoed over the ship's intercom. It was an emergency transmission from a distant fleet scout, one of the few who had made it back to the command ship after an earlier reconnaissance mission. "This is Scout Ship 47. The voice crackled. "We've encountered the Empire's fleet. They're here, and they're waiting for us." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving a deathly silence in its wake. Alia's heart raced. They were here. The Empire had been waiting for them, and it wasn't by chance. This had been their plan all along. The fear and uncertainty within the fleet grew, but Commander Thorne steeled herself. She couldn't let her crew see her doubt. They had been trained for moments like this, and now was the time to prove it. "Prepare the fleet," she ordered, her voice cutting through the silence. "We're entering the battle zone." The crew moved quickly, their hands flying over their stations. The ships began to shift in formation, each vessel aligning perfectly with the others as they moved into position. The bridge hummed with energy as the fleet's weapons were primed, shields were raised, and the battle readiness levels went to 100%. For a moment, Alia allowed herself to close her eyes, to breathe deeply, and to center her thoughts. The weight of command pressed heavily on her shoulders, but she knew she couldn't afford to let fear take over. Her crew needed her to be strong, to be decisive. Suddenly, the silence was broken by an explosion of light. A series of blinding flashes erupted in the distance. It was the first sign of enemy activity. The Empire had revealed itself. "What the hell was that?" Juno asked, his voice tense. "It's them," Alden said quietly, his eyes wide. They're making their move. We're not alone out here. Alia's eyes snapped open. There was no turning back now. The storm was coming, and they were right in the center of it. A booming voice suddenly echoed through the intercom system. It was a message from the enemy, sent with precision and authority. The voice was cold and filled with menace. "Human fleet," the voice said, "you have entered our domain. Surrender now or face the full force of the Empire." The message sent a chill through the entire bridge. This wasn't just a war. It was a declaration. The Empire had no intention of negotiations. They were ready to fight, and they would fight to win. Alia's hands clenched into fists. She wasn't about to surrender. Not now. Not ever. The humans had come too far to back down. It was time to show the Empire the strength of the human spirit. "Prepare to engage," Alia commanded. "The battle begins now." The human fleet moved forward, its engines roaring with power. The storm had arrived, and the fate of the galaxy would be decided in the next few moments. But deep inside, Alia knew one thing for sure. This fight was going to be like nothing they had ever faced before. The storm that was coming would test them all, and only the strongest would survive. The calm before the storm had ended. Now, the battle for humanity's future would begin. Arrival at the battle zone. The human fleet advanced deeper into the battle zone, the tension in the air thicker than ever. Commander Alia Thorne stood at the front of the bridge, her eyes locked on the massive star field ahead. The enemy was out there, somewhere, waiting for them. Every crew member knew this moment would determine the future of humanity. Win, and they could push the Empire back. Lose, and the consequences would be catastrophic. "Commander, we're picking up multiple enemy signatures," Lieutenant Alden announced from his station. His voice was calm, but his eyes showed the concern he was trying to hide. "The fleet is larger than we expected." Alia didn't react, but her mind raced. The Empire was known for its superior numbers and technology. But this was different. The signals were too spread out, too well organized. It wasn't just a fleet. It was a force ready for war. "How far out are they?" Alia asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Approximately 20,000 kilometers ahead, Mom," Juno responded, his fingers moving rapidly over his console. "They've set up a perimeter, and it looks like they're waiting for us to make the first move." A cold silence fell over the bridge. The human fleet was good, very good, but the Empire had always been a step ahead. The idea of facing an unknown enemy force like this made even the most experienced commanders uneasy. Alia felt that familiar sense of dread creeping in, but she pushed it aside. This wasn't the time for doubt. "Status of our weapons?" she asked, needing to focus on the mission. "Ready, Commander. We have full arsenal capacity," Alden replied. "Good," Alia said, nodding. "All ships prepare for engagement. No mistakes. Stay sharp." With that, the fleet surged forward, cutting through the vast space like a blade slicing through water. The stars around them blurred as the engines roared, pushing the ships ever closer to their enemies. The fleet moved in tight formation, each ship carefully aligned with its neighbor. Every crew member knew their role, and they executed it flawlessly. But even with their best efforts, a sense of unease still hovered. It wasn't just the unknown enemy. It was the eerie silence that surrounded them. The Empire was waiting, watching, but they weren't acting yet. It was like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Alia stood motionless, her eyes scanning every corner of the battlefield. She'd seen battles before, but nothing felt like this. The waiting, the stillness, it was unsettling. And then, just as the fleet was about to reach the outer perimeter of the enemy formation, it happened. Without warning, a brilliant explosion lit up the darkness of space. The shockwaves spread across the battlefield, shaking the human fleet to its core. Ships rocked violently, alarms blaring as shields flickered under the force of the blast. It wasn't a missile or a laser blast. It was something bigger, something more powerful. something that made even the hardened commanders stop and think. "Report," Alia shouted over the chaos. Alden's fingers flew over his console. "It's coming from the enemy fleet, Commander. They've launched some kind of energy weapon. It's a direct hit, but we're holding together." Alia felt a surge of anger and disbelief. They had anticipated enemy fire, but this was an entirely new level of threat. The Empire had been hiding something. This was no ordinary attack. "Damage report?" Alia asked, her voice tight with fury. "Minimal damage to the outer shields," Juno replied quickly. "We're still operational, but they've made their intentions clear. They're here to wipe us out, not just push us back." Another blast ripped through the darkness, closer this time, and it wasn't aimed at the flagship. This one struck one of the nearby frigates in the human fleet. The ship's shields flared brightly before they collapsed, and then an explosion rocked the ship, sending debris scattering in all directions. "Frigate Alpha 7 is lost, Commander," Alden reported, his face grim. "We've lost contact." A pang of regret shot through Alia's heart, but there was no time to mourn. She had to remain focused. If they let themselves get distracted now, they would lose everything. "Return fire," Alia barked, gripping the edge of her command station. "Let them know we're not backing down." The human fleet retaliated immediately. Bright streaks of energy pulsed from the fleet's weapons, cutting through the cold void and slamming into the enemy ships. The Empire's response was swift. Massive warships launched their own blasts, the energy beams crackling through space like lightning. The battle had begun. Alia watched as explosions rocked the enemy fleet. Despite the overwhelming firepower, the Empire's ships held firm. Their shields flared and absorbed the hits, but they didn't seem to be taking the damage that the human ships were. "Focus fire on their weak points," Alia ordered, watching as more ships fell from the enemy formation. "Concentrate all fire on their lead ship. We need to break their formation." The humans fought with everything they had, but it was clear that the enemy wasn't going down without a fight. Each ship that fell felt like a personal blow to Alia, but she refused to let her emotions show. There was too much at stake, too many lives on the line. With every passing moment, the gap between the fleets grew smaller. Both sides were now fully engaged in the battle, and neither would back down. As Alia watched the chaos unfold, she knew that this was only the beginning. They had entered the battle zone, but the true test was yet to come. And the Empire's response, it was only just starting. The first strike. The battle raged on as the human fleet and the Empire's forces clashed with all the fury of a storm. The cold, dark void of space was lit up by the brilliant flashes of energy blasts as each side sought to overwhelm the other. The hum of the fleet's engines and the sharp, echoing bursts of weapons fire created a symphony of chaos. Commander Alia Thorne stood at the center of the bridge, her focus sharp as ever. The battle had already claimed lives, human and alien alike. But despite the early losses, she could feel a growing sense of determination in the fleet. The human resolve was unbreakable, and they weren't about to back down now. "Target their lead warship," Alia shouted. "All ships, concentrate fire on that vessel. We need to cut through their command structure." The human fleet's ships responded immediately, their energy weapons firing in coordinated bursts, creating a deadly rain of fire that streaked toward the enemy warship. The massive ship ahead of them was a sight to behold. Enormous, with heavily reinforced armor and weapons that could level a planet. It was clear that the Empire had come prepared for a long fight. The first few shots hit the target, but they seemed to barely scratch the surface. The Empire's ships were unlike anything humanity had faced before, heavily shielded, with advanced tech that absorbed most of the incoming fire. "Shields are holding," Alden reported, his fingers flying over the console. "Their defensive systems are incredibly advanced. We need to find their weak points." Alia responded, her mind racing. She had studied the enemy, but no amount of preparation could have fully prepared her for the might of the Empire's forces. Their tactics were brutal and effective. It felt as if each blast from the enemy was a hammer striking the fleet, and for every inch of ground gained, the humans paid with blood. Just then, a sharp alarm blared from the communications console. Juno's voice rang out, urgent and filled with concern. "Commander, we've detected a massive energy buildup. It's coming from their lead ship." Alia's heart skipped a beat. They'd only just begun the fight, and now the enemy was preparing something even more dangerous. She knew what that meant. The Empire was ready to unleash their ultimate weapon. "Brace for impact," Alia ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Deploy full shield strength across all ships. Get everyone ready." It was too late. A massive beam of concentrated energy shot out from the enemy ship, slicing through space like a blade. The beam slammed into the human fleet's outer formation, and everything exploded in an instant. The shields of several ships flickered and failed under the overwhelming force of the energy blast. The lights on the bridge dimmed, and alarms blared as the ship rocked violently. "Damage report," Alia demanded, gripping her chair as the ship's hull groaned under the impact. "Shield integrity at 60%, Commander. We've lost 2 support ships, Alpha 5 and Beta 3, Juno replied, his voice grim. "The enemy's weapon. It's unlike anything we've seen." Alia's heart sank. 2 ships gone in an instant, their crews lost in the blink of an eye. The Empire's power was undeniable, but that wasn't going to stop her. Not now. Not when they were this far in. "We can't let them keep firing those weapons," Alia said, her eyes narrowing with determination. "Get a targeting lock on their lead ship. Fire everything we've got." The human fleet fought back with everything they had. Energy beams, missiles, and torpedoes filled the void, racing toward the enemy warship. The enemy's return fire was relentless, but for every strike that hit, a human ship answered. The sound of battle was deafening as the ships of both sides continued to pummel each other with all their might. The human fleet had learned from the first strike. They spread out, giving each ship more space to maneuver, avoiding the massive energy beam by staying unpredictable. But still, the Empire had the upper hand. Every shot that hit the human ships dealt significant damage, and it felt like the battle was slipping away. Then a new signal came through, a faint, almost imperceptible blip that barely registered on the radar. "Commander, we've got something," Alden called out, his voice full of disbelief. Alia's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "It's a secondary fleet. Human reinforcements," Alden reported. "They've arrived early. This is Captain Stroud's fleet." Relief flooded Alia's chest. Back up. The tide was turning. But the fight wasn't over yet. The enemy had expected them to be easy targets, unprepared and outgunned, but they hadn't anticipated the resilience of the human spirit. The reinforcements were here, and with them came a fresh wave of hope. "Send a signal to Captain Stroud's fleet. Tell them to focus on taking down the enemy's artillery ships. We need to neutralize their long-range firepower." The reinforcements quickly formed up alongside the human fleet, their arrival changing the dynamic of the battle. The Empire's forces, though still formidable, were now facing a 2-pronged attack. As the new human ships closed in, they began to strike at the Empire's artillery ships with precision, firing volleys of high-powered missiles that tore through the enemy's defenses. The Empire was not used to this kind of resistance, and the tide of the battle began to shift. For the first time, the humans had the upper hand, even if just for a moment. But it wasn't over. The Empire's retaliation was swift, and the battle raged on with renewed intensity. The lead ship, the one that had unleashed the devastating energy weapon, continued to fire relentlessly at the human ships. The first strike had shown the Empire's power. But now, with reinforcements on the way and human resolve at an all-time high, the battle was becoming something entirely different. The real fight had only just begun. The enemy's desperation, The battle in the depths of space raged on, with both sides refusing to relent. The humans had rallied, their reinforcements turning the tide for a brief moment. But the Empire was not so easily defeated. The enemy had already shown their devastating strength, and now the humans were about to learn that the Empire's tactics were even more dangerous than their weapons. "Commander, we're receiving strange signals," Lieutenant Alden said, his voice strained as he monitored the communication channels. "It's like they're coordinating." Alia's brow furrowed. "Coordinating how?" "They're splitting up, Commander," Alden continued. "Small fleets, different sectors. It looks like they're flanking us." The realization hit Alia like a ton of bricks. The Empire wasn't just attacking with raw firepower. They were using strategy, exploiting their superior tactics to surround and overwhelm the human fleet. The sudden shift in the enemy's approach meant one thing: they had recognized the humans' growing advantage, and they were desperate to turn the battle in their favor. "Send a warning to the fleet," Alia ordered. "Tell them to stay alert for flanking maneuvers. We need to hold our ground on all sides." "Roger that, Commander," Juno replied, sending the signal. But even as the warning was sent, the human fleet's position began to falter. The Empire's ships, sleek and efficient, spread out like a spider weaving its web. Smaller ships, more agile and maneuverable, darted from the edges of the battle, slipping into positions that would put the human ships at a disadvantage. The Empire was creating chaos, confusing the humans with fast, unexpected attacks from multiple angles. "Enemy ships closing in from the right," shouted Alden, his hands flying over the console. "They've surrounded us on 3 sides. We got to reposition, or we'll be caught." "Raise shields to full power," Alia commanded. "I want every ship to move toward the center of the formation. Do not let them break us apart." The humans attempted to regroup, pulling together to form a more concentrated defense. But the Empire was relentless. They moved like a swarm, striking quickly and then vanishing into the darkness of space, only to appear somewhere else, attacking again. Every time the humans thought they had a handle on the situation, the Empire shifted tactics, exploiting any weakness they could find. Alia gripped the edge of her chair, her knuckles white with tension. She had expected a fight, but this was more than just a battle. The Empire's ability to adapt, to outmaneuver them, was beginning to take its toll. They were losing ground, bit by bit, and the human fleet was starting to show signs of weakness. A flash of light tore through space as another blast hit one of the human ships. It was a smaller frigate, caught in the crossfire. The explosion ripped through the ship's hull, sending debris flying in all directions. "Frigate Bravo 4 is gone," Juno said quietly. "Another casualty." Alia's heart clenched, but she forced herself to focus. The human fleet was losing ships, but they couldn't afford to be distracted by grief. If they didn't act fast, they would lose everything. "We need to disrupt their coordination," Alia said, her mind racing. "If we can break their formation, we can force them to fight us on our terms. Focus all fire on their command ships, anything controlling their flanking maneuvers." "Understood, Commander," Alden responded, focusing fire on the lead enemy vessels now. The humans' counterattack was swift, a barrage of energy blasts and missiles aimed at the enemy's lead ships. They hit their targets, but the Empire's ships were still evading with incredible precision, darting in and out of range. It was clear that the Empire had anticipated this tactic. They were using their smaller, faster vessels to create confusion and disarray among the human ranks. "Commander, they're smaller ships," Alden began, but his words were drowned out by another explosion. One of the human dreadnoughts took a direct hit, its shields flaring before the blast tore through its outer layers. The dreadnought shuddered, but the ship held strong for now. However, the attack had pushed them closer to the breaking point. "We can't keep taking hits like this," Alia muttered, more to herself than anyone else. The human fleet was resilient, but the Empire's unrelenting pressure was starting to take its toll. "Prepare for a new strategy. We're going to force them into a corner." As the Empire's ships continued to swarm, Aelia knew it was time to take the fight to them. If they could lure the enemy into a position where they couldn't retreat, the humans could strike with full force. The battle would not end unless the Empire was forced to retreat or annihilated. Set a course for the asteroid field to the left of our current position, Aelia ordered. We're going to use it for cover and draw them in. Prepare to deploy mines. We'll make it look like we're retreating, and when they follow, trap them. Alden finished with a sharp nod. Understood. The human fleet quickly adjusted its position, pulling away from the enemy formation and heading toward the asteroid field. It was a risky maneuver, but it was their only chance to turn the tide. The Empire's smaller ships would think they had an opening, and they'd pursue. If they did, the humans would have them right where they wanted them. But the Empire's ships were not so easily fooled. "Commander," Juno shouted, his eyes wide with disbelief. "The enemy's not following us. They're pulling back. The entire fleet is repositioning. They're adapting to our plan." Aelia's mind raced. The Empire had anticipated their every move. They weren't just desperate. They were far more dangerous than she'd thought. The human fleet had been baited, but the Empire was staying one step ahead. As the enemy fleet repositioned, the fight took on a new urgency. The human fleet had to make a choice. Continue to push forward and risk being picked apart, or pull back and regroup, knowing the Empire was already plotting its next devastating move. The battle was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. The humans had to dig deep, find a way to survive the Empire's relentless onslaught, or risk losing everything they had fought for. Turning the tide. The battle had reached a critical point. The Empire, relentless in their pursuit, had adapted to every tactic the humans had thrown at them. It was a back-and-forth struggle, with each side gaining and losing ground at an alarming rate. The human fleet had suffered casualties, but they were not broken. The crew members were determined, their spirits unshaken by the mounting losses. Commander Aelia Thorne stood at the heart of the chaos, her mind calculating every move, her eyes scanning the battlefield. The Empire had pulled back momentarily, and the human fleet had used the brief respite to regroup and recover. But the real challenge was ahead. This battle was far from over. "Commander, we're receiving another transmission from Captain Stroud's fleet," Lieutenant Alden reported, his voice tense. "It's not good news." Aelia's stomach twisted. Captain Stroud's fleet had been the second wave of reinforcements. If they were reporting trouble, it meant the Empire was starting to gain ground again. "What's the situation?" Aelia asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Alden glanced at the screen, his eyes narrowing. The Empire's smaller ships. They've surrounded Stroud's fleet. They're trapped in an asteroid field, and they're taking heavy fire. They won't be able to hold out much longer. A moment of silence hung in the air. Aelia knew that if Stroud's fleet fell, the Empire would have the upper hand. The reinforcements were crucial. The humans needed to hold strong, but they also had to act fast. The clock was ticking. "Send a message to Stroud," Aelia ordered, her tone firm. "Tell him we're coming to their aid. Get ready to break out of that asteroid field. We're not losing another fleet." She turned to Juno. "Plot a course. We're going to hit the Empire hard. We need to create a diversion so Stroud can escape." Juno's fingers flew over his console. "Course set, Commander. We'll take the fight directly to their lead ship. It's time to break their formation." Aelia nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. This was their chance. They had to turn the tide in their favor, or everything they had fought for would be lost. The human fleet surged forward, engines roaring as they moved with precision. Their ships darted through the void, weaving in and out of enemy fire. The Empire's forces were stretched thin, their smaller ships too dispersed, and the human fleet's maneuvering gave them a slight edge. "Focus fire on the Empire's command ships," Aelia ordered. "We need to disrupt their coordination." The humans responded with deadly efficiency. A volley of energy beams, missiles, and torpedoes ripped through the space between them. slamming into the enemy's lead ships. The Empire's command ships, large and heavily armored, absorbed the fire, but the relentless assault was taking its toll. Shields flickered and weakened with each impact. "Direct hit on their flagship, Commander," Alden shouted. "They're taking damage." Alia's eyes flicked to the screen. The flagship of the Empire, a massive, imposing vessel, was beginning to show signs of vulnerability. The humans had found their weak point, and now they had to exploit it. But even as the Empire's flagship faltered, the rest of the fleet closed in, their smaller ships moving to reinforce the command structure. "We've created the distraction," Alia said, her voice steady but urgent. "Now, let's finish it." At that moment, a sudden signal burst through the communication system, a distress call from Captain Stroud. "This is Stroud." The captain's voice crackled. "We're breaking out of the asteroid field, but we need cover. The Empire's forces are closing in on us fast." "Hold tight, Captain," Alia responded. "We're coming in hot." The human fleet veered toward the asteroid field, their weapons still blazing as they fought off the enemy's reinforcements. The Empire's smaller ships tried to cut them off, but the human ships were too quick. The humans had the advantage of speed and maneuverability, qualities the Empire had underestimated. As Stroud's fleet broke free of the asteroid field, the two forces combined, adding strength to the human front. The Empire had underestimated the coordination between the human fleets. They were fighting with unity and strength now, and the Empire's overconfidence was beginning to unravel. The humans pressed the attack, pushing the Empire's forces back. The combined fleets focused on the Empire's smaller ships, picking them off one by one. The relentless human assault was forcing the Empire to rethink its approach. The smaller ships, once the Empire's advantage, were now on the defensive, retreating under the barrage of firepower from the human fleet. "We're gaining ground, Commander," Juno shouted. "The Empire's smaller ships are retreating, and their command ships are starting to break apart." Alia felt a surge of hope, but she didn't allow herself to relax. They were making progress, yes, but the Empire's flagship was still in play. If they didn't take it down soon, all their efforts could be undone in an instant. "Keep up the pressure," Alia ordered. "Focus everything on their flagship. We're not stopping until it's gone." The human fleet closed in on the enemy flagship, its massive weapons firing back at them with brutal force. The Empire's flagship retaliated, its weapons glowing bright, but the humans were relentless. Energy blasts filled the air as the fleet moved into position for a final strike. Then it happened. With a massive explosion, the flagship's shields collapsed, and the ship began to break apart. The massive vessel trembled, and for a moment, it seemed as though the entire fleet had gone still. The Empire's flagship was destroyed. The remaining Empire forces hesitated. Without their flagship to lead them, their coordination faltered. The human fleet seized the opportunity, focusing fire on the remaining ships. The Empire's once strong front began to crumble under the weight of the human assault. "Empire flagship down, Commander," Alden shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. "We've done it." But Alia knew that the victory wasn't complete. The Empire would not give up so easily. There was still more to fight for. "Keep pushing," Alia said firmly. "This isn't over yet. We've turned the tide, but we need to finish this." The human fleet, now unified and fueled by a newfound sense of hope, continued its assault, pushing the Empire's forces back with relentless precision. The battle was far from over, but the humans were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for victory. And victory, it seemed, was within their grasp. The final strike. The explosion of the Empire's flagship sent shockwaves through the battlefield. The once strong, coordinated force of the Empire now showed cracks. Their command structure had been shattered, and the remaining forces struggled to reorganize. For the first time in the battle, the humans saw a glimmer of hope. But the Empire wasn't defeated yet. They still had the will to fight, and their retaliation was swift and violent. "Commander, the Empire is regrouping," Alden reported, his voice tense. "They're trying to form a last-ditch defense. We've crippled their flagship, but there are still plenty of warships left." Alia's eyes narrowed. The victory over the flagship was significant, but it wasn't the end. The Empire's forces were still formidable. Their sheer numbers were overwhelming, and they still had enough strength to pose a serious threat. "We've bought ourselves some time," Alia said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We're not going to waste it. All ships, concentrate fire on the remaining command ships. We need to wipe them out, and fast." The human fleet surged forward, a wave of destruction cutting through the dark expanse of space. The remaining Empire ships, though battered and disorganized, fought back fiercely. The Empire's warships had heavy armor, but they were no match for the human fleet's precise attacks. Each strike hit with pinpoint accuracy, each missile finding its mark. Alia's pulse quickened as the battle intensified. The human fleet was closing in on the last of the Empire's command ships, and she knew this was the moment that would decide the outcome of the battle. There could be no hesitation. "Commander, we're getting reports of enemy reinforcements," Juno called out. "They're coming in from the other side of the system. Fast." Alia's heart skipped a beat. The Empire wasn't done. They were calling in reinforcements, desperate to turn the tide. The new arrivals weren't enough to change the balance of power, but they would certainly buy the Empire more time. "Send a warning to the fleet," Alia ordered. "Tell them to prepare for a full-on assault. We need to neutralize the remaining command ships before the reinforcements arrive." No distractions. The human fleet pressed on, ignoring the incoming reinforcements. Their focus was laser-sharp. The remaining command ships were within range, and the humans were determined to finish the job. "Focus all fire on their central command ship," Alia commanded. "If we can take it out, the rest will crumble." The fleet responded with brutal efficiency. The remaining Empire ships tried to evade, but they were too slow, too disorganized. The human fleet's accuracy was unmatched. The central command ship, a massive, heavily armored vessel, absorbed several hits, but it was no match for the humans' coordinated assault. The barrage of energy blasts and missiles tore through its shields, and within minutes, the ship began to break apart. "Direct hit on their command ship, Commander," Alden shouted, his voice filled with excitement. "It's going down." Alia's eyes locked onto the screen as the enemy ship's hull began to crumble, its massive frame shaking under the force of the human attack. The Empire's final command ship exploded in a burst of fire and debris, marking the end of their resistance. The shockwave from the explosion sent ripples through the battlefield. The remaining Empire ships hesitated, their morale shattered. Without their command structure, they were just ships without a leader. The reinforcements that had been on their way now found themselves facing the full might of the human fleet, with no guidance and no coordination. It was the Empire's final weakness. "Empire command ship destroyed," Juno called out. "We've broken their will. The rest of their fleet is retreating." Alia allowed herself a brief moment of relief, but there was no time to waste. The remaining Empire forces were attempting to retreat, but the human fleet wouldn't let them escape. Not after everything they had lost. "Don't let them get away," Alia ordered. "Destroy their escape ships. We can't let them regroup and rebuild." The human fleet surged forward again, pressing the attack on the retreating Empire ships. The battle, once a desperate struggle for survival, had become a hunt. The Empire's forces were scattered, and the human fleet was relentless. Each retreating ship was picked off one by one, until there was no sign of the enemy left. Finally, the last of the Empire's forces were destroyed or forced to retreat beyond the system. The human fleet stood victorious, though at a heavy cost. Ships were damaged and lives were lost, but they had done what many had thought impossible. "Commander," Alden said, his voice soft with awe, "we've done it. The Empire is broken. We've won." Alia stood silently for a moment, her heart still racing from the intensity of the battle. The victory was hard won, but it was theirs. The Empire, for now, had been defeated. The human fleet had shown that, no matter the odds, they could stand firm and overcome the impossible. Victory, yes, Aelia said quietly, her voice filled with pride. But at what cost? She looked out at the remnants of the battle. The stars were still, and the void of space had returned to a quiet calm, though the echoes of the conflict would linger for a long time. The human fleet had triumphed, but the scars of the battle would remain. The Empire might have been defeated today, but Aelia knew this was only the beginning of humanity's struggle. They had proven themselves, yes, but there would always be more battles to fight, more threats to face, and as long as there was a need to fight, the human fleet would stand strong, ready to protect the galaxy and their future. The final strike had been dealt, and humanity had proven its place among the stars. But the war was far from over. Aftermath and reflection. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. As the human fleet drifted through the stillness of space, Commander Aelia Thorne stood quietly on the bridge of the flagship. The stars outside, once filled with chaos and explosions, were now a serene backdrop. The smoke and debris from the battle were slowly dissipating, leaving only the stark silence of a victory that had come at a steep cost. The human fleet had proven their might against the Empire, but the toll was undeniable. "Commander," Lieutenant Alden said quietly, his voice a mix of relief and exhaustion, "we've secured the battlefield. The Empire's forces have been decimated. We've also received word that Captain Stroud's fleet has safely made it back into formation. The remaining Empire ships have retreated." Aelia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of those words settle in her chest. "It's over for now," she replied softly, her gaze fixed on the screen that showed the remains of the Empire's once proud fleet, now reduced to scattered debris and crippled ships. "But we both know the Empire will rebuild. This victory may not be the end of their plans." The cost of the battle was evident. The human fleet had lost several ships, some of them critical to the strength of the force. The frigates, support vessels, and even a dreadnought had been destroyed, their crews lost in the chaos of the fight. The damage to their warships would take time to repair. Aelia glanced at the damage reports coming in, her heart sinking with every casualty. "Commander," Juno called from the tactical station, his voice breaking through her thoughts. "We've completed an initial assessment. We've lost approximately 1/3 of the fleet's strength. The damage is extensive, but manageable. The surviving ships are fully operational, and our repair crews are already working on the damaged vessels." "Thank you, Lieutenant," Aelia said, her voice firm but filled with an undercurrent of weariness. She turned her gaze to the holographic map of the battle, where red and green dots indicated the status of the fleet. The green dots were fewer now, and they represented the ships that remained intact. The rest had fallen or were in the process of being repaired. A soft chime interrupted the moment. It was a message, an encrypted transmission that had just come through. Aelia's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the sender. "It's from High Command," Aelia murmured. She opened the message, her eyes scanning the contents quickly. The message was short, but it carried weight. "Congratulations on your victory, Commander. Humanity has proven its strength. However, this victory comes at a cost, and we cannot afford to let our guard down. The Empire will not rest. Prepare for what comes next." The message was a reminder of the fragility of this peace. The Empire was down, but not out. They would return. And when they did, the humans had to be ready. "Prepare a debrief for all fleet commanders," Aelia said, her tone resolute. "We need to discuss next steps." This is only the beginning. As Aelia turned to leave the bridge, her thoughts drifted to the crew, the brave men and women who had fought and died to defend humanity's future. She thought of the families they would never see again, the faces of those who had made the ultimate sacrifice. Their loss weighed heavily on her heart, but it also filled her with a sense of determination. Humanity had proven itself today, but Aelia knew there was still much more to be done. The Empire may have lost this battle, but they were not finished. And as long as the Empire remained, the fight for survival would continue. But Aelia also knew something else. The human spirit had been forged in this fire. They had faced a seemingly unstoppable force, and against all odds, had emerged victorious. This battle would go down in history as a testament to their strength, their unity, and their relentless will to survive. As Aelia looked out at the stars once more, she knew that the next chapter of humanity's story was about to begin. And this time, they would be ready. The war was not over, but humanity had proven its resilience. The human fleet would rebuild, grow stronger, and prepare for the next challenge. For in the vast, dark reaches of space, humanity's light had only just begun to shine. The storm had passed, but the horizon was filled with new threats, new challenges, and new victories waiting to be claimed. And with that thought, Aelia Thorne set her gaze on the stars ahead. She knew that whatever came next, humanity would face it as one, strong, united, and ready for whatever the future held. The fight for survival had just begun, but the human spirit would never falter.